Hello, everybody. So my name is Salome. We were in live for 10 seconds, but I've missed a little bit. So I'm really glad to present this live and to introduce people. The live is presented by the Global First Aid Reference Center for the launch of the International First Aid, Resuscitation and Education Guidelines. We will present also the International First Aid Attestation project, and we will have also the occasion to serve on the web platform. Today we have a great expert panel with us, and I'm really happy to be with Pascal, the director of the GFARC, who is also my boss, Dr. Jeffrey Pellegrino from American Red Cross, Thomas Wilp from ICRC. Hello, Thomas. We have also Suzanne from Austria. Hello, Suzanne, who is part of the clinical task force with Andrew from Canada. Hello, Andrew. And Emily and Christine from British Red Cross will also accompany us for the beginning of this live. So again, welcome to you guys. You are more than 100 to watch us now. Do not hesitate to ask your question in the chat in YouTube or even Facebook or LinkedIn. We are here to answer those. We will have a question and answer with people, and then we'll also try to collect all your feedback and question for the after question and answer. So I will let Dr. Pascal Cassin introduce this team and those 3 important projects that we call Harmonization Pack, and then we come with the experts. So we are on live for the Global First Aid Reference Center project, the platform, the guidelines, and the IFA. Thank you, Pascal. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I have the pleasure to be with a big team of all around the world, from Canada to England, and we have the east part of Europe also, Austria and other countries. That's fantastic, and it's effectively these webcasts will present 3 main aims of the Global First Aid Reference Center for Harmonization. First, of course, the guidelines, because 2020 is the year of to update the techniques and also the pedagogy of first aid, and it will be one of the purposes of this webcast. And second, of course, it will be the International First Aid Attestation, because within the movement, within the 192 national society, we want to harmonize. We want to have a minimal common denominator, and it will be the most important aim of the International First Aid Attestation. And last and not least, to be all together every day, every second, we will have at your disposal the web platform. It will be a platform of communication of the Global First Aid Reference Center. You will share your experience with the other experience of the 192 national society. So very welcome. And now I let the floor to Christopher.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pascal. So good day, everyone. My name is Christopher Theris, and I'm so happy to get to speak to people from around the world today. We are celebrating and we are sharing today. We have representation from over 45 countries that have contributed to our work, and we are pleased to be launching the International First Aid, Resuscitation and Education Guidelines for 2020. Like I said, my name is Christopher Theris, and I'm here in Ottawa, as you may be able to tell from my background full of snow. I'm a member of the Canadian Red Cross, and I'm speaking here with some of the most extraordinary people that I've had the pleasure to meet. You'll get to meet them in turn when we check in with each of them and we ask about how they contributed to developing the guidelines. If you have questions for the panel, like Salome said at the beginning, our team is watching closely and will pass on your questions as they come up. We've reserved some time at the end of our discussion specifically for your questions. So let's get started with one of our key players, Christine Bose, who's half of our editorial team. Chris, before we get started, I'm going to ask you to share a few things that you're excited about the guidelines.
Oh, great. Yeah, sure. So, gosh, what I'm excited about? I'm most excited about the fact that not only in the 2020 guidelines do we have the scientific foundation and the guidelines sort of outlining all of that evidence base, all the available evidence, but we've now also had experts from all around the world interpret that evidence and develop some recommendations in the chain of survival behaviours, so things like prevention and recognition and the first aid steps, as well as education considerations, so things around learner considerations or context considerations. And I think that all of that information is really going to help with national societies when they implement the guidelines locally, that they'll be able to use it to adapt it and make it really relevant to their audiences.
Excellent, thank you. And Chris, tell us what your role was with the guidelines, a little bit about the work that you did.
Yeah, sure. So I have been the one of the editors on the guidelines most recently. So yeah, I was working on sort of working with all the contributors to turn them so that they were consistent across the different topics.
So Chris's eyes have been on every word in the guidelines, and it's been her attention to detail that's really brought the product together. We're very excited to have you. Pascal, can you tell us what you're most excited about?
Yes, of course. These 2020 guidelines allow first aid to be harmonized and adapted to all environments. And for the most industrialized or to the most isolated place, and they can be used for all national society, but also for all partners active in first aid training. It's very important within, but also outside the Red Cross. These guidelines contribute to the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society's goal to train one member of every household in the world in first aid. And that's fantastic. This guideline also opened the door to research, as much evidence is lacking in some areas of first aid. And these guidelines are an excellent opportunity to rethink first aid as a tool for education, behavior change, but also social inclusion. That's all that can represent our publication today. Thank you.
Excellent. Just a brief pause. We are extraordinarily happy to have people here from Philippines, from Kenya. We've got representation from Guatemala, Argentina, France, Portugal, and that's just the ones that I could keep up with in the chat. So welcome, thank you for joining us. Chris and Pascal, we'll start with Chris. Can you tell us what's the big question here is, what's the level of changes from 2016?
I think the big change is the scope of the guidelines in 2020. We've got, I think it's over 25 new topics. So those are first aid topics like emergency childbirth and hypothermia, which are appearing for the first time. There's education topics, so education modalities like blended learning and online learning, and also context. So some of the common contexts like conflict or disaster. So that we've got that scope of the number of topics we're covering, but also within the topics themselves, we've increased the scope. So there's lots more educational content in them. So I think it's like there's a really rich content that people will be able to dive into, and even the existing topics that were in 2016, you'll find lots of new and interesting stuff. I think that there are also some changes to some of the topics from the science that we got, so clinically. So you'll see that some topics like burns, for example, the recommendation has increased from a minimum of 10 minutes to a recommendation that if you can do 20 minutes of cooling with cold water, that you cool it for 20 minutes. So there are some changes like that too. And we've made a what's new document, and that actually lists all the major changes. So we've tried to summarize them for national societies. So that's available on the Global First Aid Reference Center website, and national societies, everyone, you can all download the what's new document and see that summary there.
Awesome. Pascal, can you tell us about the level of changes from 2016? Now, you've been with us from the start, going from 2011, 2016, and all the way to 2020. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
For sure, for sure. We, as Christine said, we enlarge the scope, and it's very clear that we want to link the normal life and the daily risk with the disaster risk, for example, and we to be able to act when an accident happen in kitchen, but also during a disaster where perhaps we have not the emergency medical system possible to come to the scene. And it's very clear also to enlarge for social inclusion, and that's very important for the Red Cross and the Red Crescent to include everybody on the first aid, because we need the first citizen will be your neighbor, you will be your perhaps somebody of your family, and that's the most important things we want to enlarge in the guidelines. And it's very clear that for us these guidelines are open for everybody, from the smallest part of the world to the biggest part, and that's very important.
Excellent. That theme of social inclusion and diversity will come up. I think you'll hear about that a few times today as people share what they're excited about the guidelines. Let's turn to Emily Oliver from the British Red Cross. Emily, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you're most excited about for the guidelines?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's amazing to see all these countries on the call. Thank you so much for joining us. My role in the guidelines was leading the education working group, and so I'm most excited about the high level of education which is included in the content. I think what's really great is that it's really what Christine and Pascal have already said. It's that scope, and it's also the format of the guidelines. I think what we've done here, I would hope, is that we've really transformed science into something that you guys all do. This is what you need to do on the ground. This is what your learners will need to do. It's that transformation of that science into how you actually use it in a very practical way. And that's what makes it unique. That's what makes these guidelines unique. They're not the same as the other clinical guidelines that we see coming out from different organizations. They're all terribly useful, but I think ours are unique in that they really help you to use the science really well, to educate people, to help them to save lives.
Amazing. And so what do these guidelines contribute to the international first aid community? Can you build on that a little bit for us?
Goodness, yes. I hope that they contribute an awful lot. I mean, just in the education working group alone, I was really privileged to work with people from 27 countries, I think, who contributed to the education aspects. And for every education topic and every clinical topic, we tried to get a reviewer who was from a high resource setting and a lower resource setting. And that way they could each put in their contributions around how to actually educate people with different levels of resources, different access to materials, to first aid kits, to EMS, to ambulance services, to medical healthcare, so that we've tried to really make sure that this works throughout all of your national societies. And I think that's what it really brings to the international platform.
Excellent, thank you. You know, there's so many people that are popping up in the chat. I'm trying to keep track of them all, but welcome from Estonia, Austria, Indonesia, Grenada, Kuala Lumpur, Hong Kong, Mongolia, Germany, Tanzania. We're so happy to have you here with us today. Let's talk a little bit with some of our clinical contributors, Suzanne and Andrew. Suzanne, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you're most excited about for the 2020 guidelines?
Yeah, hello, my name is Dr. Schunda. I'm Suzanne. I'm a volunteer of the Austrian Red Cross, and I'm so excited to see how this process have developed. When I made the first survey on trying to harmonize or to find out what different techniques the different national society are using, it was back in 2003. I got 18 answers back from national society, and at the end, we have even 5 different definitions on what the severe bleeding is, and a real full number of different ideas how to stop a severe bleeding. And over the years, we have really developed more and more science and now more and more education to bring forward the harmonization process and to have a more comprehensive document with even some more topics we had not had included in the past. So I think it's a big step forward for where we started 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Andrew, can you tell us what you're most excited about? And please share. And of course, I should be saying Dr. McPherson and Dr. Schunder.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. You know, I had some prepared things I was going to say, but I'll be honest. The best part is we've spent as a group hours and hours on Zoom looking at the same faces over and over again. And it is so cool to see so many people from around the world and watching you pop up. And I think that's actually the strength in this. So it's good to see all of you again, but boy, is it great to see Matt from Bangladesh. That's just awesome. Great. I'm an emergency and EMS physician here in sunny Victoria in the west coast of Canada. And I think the key, there's so much clinical information that's included in here, and how we can learn better, how we can learn more inclusively. But I really think the key to this is the educational platform and the internet, that website that we have available for this. This is a huge document, 400 plus pages of guidelines and information. And that's why there's so much summary work. But we heard really clearly from national societies that having it as a book is a bit more difficult. Having it as a complex website is a bit more difficult for some platforms, and being able to hold it in something this size and have it on a website that you can scroll through and look at in a defined way. If you're on cellular data instead of Wi-Fi, it's adaptable, so it works on mobile, it works on a computer, and it's applicable around the world. So I think that's the first real strength in what's this humongous project. It's not a real word, I'm going to use it anyways. Humongous project is from the International First Aid, Resuscitation and Education Guidelines. Included in there is the ability to share, and that's what our foundation is, and bringing ideas and bringing people together to be able to share their experiences, what worked in different environments, a function there for us to share our stories, what's been effective, what hasn't been effective, and how we can continue to improve this. So thank you for being here, ma'am. It's great to see you from the Thai Red Cross. I think this is a super exciting day. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Andrew. And just if you haven't caught it already, the website that Andrew's speaking about is globalfirstaidcenter.org, and that's all over our materials as well if you want to check that out. One of the questions that came up was, are the guidelines live yet? They absolutely are. Not only are they live in terms of a PDF that you can go ahead and download, but also, as Andrew described, live in a true sense of a word, that they're up there and they're navigable on our website. So again, that's globalfirstaidcenter.org. Andrew and Suzanne, can you talk to us a little bit about what does evidence-based mean? And we'll start off with Suzanne. Suzanne, we can't quite hear you yet. Can you unmute for us?
I already said before, we started from eminence-based medicine, where we taught first aid, how we learned it from our teachers, and now we are in the fine situation, and especially thanks to the contribution for the Center of Evidence-Based Practice from the Belgian Red Cross, that they go through the scientific literature and look for scientific evidence, so that we really can work on developing evidence-based first aid guidelines.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Andrew, same question. Can you tell us a little bit about the evidence-based process?
Well, yeah, Suzanne, that's great. We certainly have worked from an eminence-based, and that's a bit of a joke in medicine. Yes, Your Eminence, that's what I'm going to do, which refers to your seniors just telling you, here's what we do, because it's the way you've always done. They tell us in medical school that, at least they did 20 years ago, that half of what I learned in medical school would change over my career. And I think that's probably similar in some parts of first aid over that long period of time. And instead of relying on a few people that seem invested in it, looking at the science and the evidence is absolutely key to making sure that we have a robust, long-standing program. And this isn't just the group around the table, and as you've heard, the number of people from around the world, but We've accessed people from ILCOR, the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, from the American Red Cross Scientific Advisory Council, which has been a workhorse of evidence-based reviews and looking at the science behind what we do. The European Resuscitation Council, and then certainly there's again a humongous amount of work that happens through the Belgium Red Cross. Has a incredible amount of evidence-based reviews, which they continue to publish and work through. So we're not doing these guidelines, although there are some parts that have good practice points where we just don't have the science to say, oh, this is the best. We've clearly marked them that we just think these are the best. And then we've also clearly marked there's science behind this. This is good evidence. This is excellent evidence of what we should be doing. And you'll see that well defined throughout the entire guideline. The levels of evidence, what's really good, what's super good, and what's just a couple of people that have been doing this for a while think is good. And those good practice points are becoming less common.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, I'm just checking in with our numbers, and we've got hundreds of viewers across our platform. So again, we're so thankful to have people here from the Hellenic Red Cross, Red Crescent, Lebanon, Ireland, Bangladesh, Albania, Tunisia, Armenia, Romania, Germany, Thailand. There's quite a few people joining us from around the world. Suzanne, tell all of these people how much time it takes to be a contributor and how they might, and we will talk to them a little bit later about how they could become a contributor for the next guidelines. So how much time did you spend, do you think?
Oh, I think you cannot really use it in hours, or I can give the full number of hours. It's a process, and when we finalized the last guidelines, I'm normally a big traveler on business purpose and also private, and I visited the Seychelles Red Cross or Malaysian Red Cross or Abu Dhabi Red Crescent and ask the colleagues, what are you missing? And we get there a lot of good ideas. For instance, hypothermia was a topic we had not in the past. And then 2019, we started to think, okay, what have we learned? What were the good aspects from the process? Where do we need some additional activities? And then we started to form the group and distribute the work and who will work on what, and have a look in the science we get from the Belgium and from other sources, and write or rewrite the chapters we already had, or started to write the new chapters we did not have in the past. And so slowly this process come together, and then there were revisions. So it's quite some time, and the main activity 2019, summer 2020, we certainly had some input from the pandemic, which slowed a little bit the process because many of us had other roles to fulfill and could not fully dedicate their time to this process.
Thank you very much. Emily, can you talk a little bit about the evidence process for our education topics as well?
Yes, of course. So for the education topics, we actually started off with a survey that went out from GFARC in 2018, asking what sort of education topics people out there wanted to know about. And as you can imagine, we got a huge sort of torrent of answers. A lot of them were very digitally focused, and so we tended to prioritize digital learning, which has actually been quite helpful over the last year, because I think a lot of people have turned to digital learning during the coronavirus pandemic. But the process that we went through, then we had this great big group of contributors, of reviewers. Christine and I actually spent most of the winter of 2018, 2019, sifting our way through hundreds and hundreds, thousands, in fact, of papers, academic papers, which had educational content in them, because we'd put together a couple of questions that created a search strategy for us. And one of those questions was very much on the modalities. So what tools do you use to learn? What sort of learning approaches can you use? And the other question was very much about the effectiveness of those. So how did those modalities actually work out in practice? How effective were they? And we tried to do that. We tried to look for real insights across different learner audiences, different countries, different contexts, and so on, different ages, different types of community. And it was quite challenging because, as you can imagine, there isn't still that much of an evidence base around effective education. Nobody measures education in the same way. Nobody does two projects the same ever. So it's very difficult to compare learning modalities. But having gone through all of these papers and pulled out ones that we thought could offer us some insight, we were then able to sort of categorize them into different learning modalities that we could then review and come up with some kind of some findings as to how effective they might be with different audiences. And I hope that what you'll find when you look through the guidelines themselves is something around what might work for you. The principles of what we've said are actually the same as what we said in 2016. You've got to put your learner at the center of your education. You've got to find out what they want to learn, when they want to learn, how long they've got available to learn, what their attention span is, whether they want to learn online or in a classroom or for 10 minutes or 24 hours or however they want to learn. And you need to adapt the content to what is relevant to them. Don't go teaching them a huge menu of topics, because they won't remember it and they won't bring it in. What we've found really was that you need to teach them what's relevant to them, what's going to be meaningful, and what is going to make sense to their lives and make a difference to their lives in their community. So we worked with our reviewers around the world, as I mentioned before, really just trying to pull apart that evidence and then restructure it in the format that we have in the guidelines, so that you can have a look and see, well, maybe I should consider some video learning or some peer education or some online content. But those learning principles are there within each of those topics, and that was a really good finding. I think that we were able to reinforce those learning messages across all of those modalities.
And hey, Emily, as Suzanne said, as you're going through these guidelines, you'll see things that excite you, that go, wow, this is a niche. This is something I enjoy. This is what I like. If you don't feel like dedicating hundreds and hundreds of hours to the project, you don't need to. In fact, most of our reviewers would focus on a few topics. They'd look at one or two or three of them, things that were key to them. And we need different people through different lenses to look at that. So as you're going through, when you find stuff that you go, oh, this is so neat. This is really cool. I want to understand this. That probably means you want to come and do a worksheet with us for the next time round. You don't need to do 100 hours. You could take that topic and say, I want to be one of the experts in the world around this. And we would love to have all of you come and contribute with us as a group.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrew. Next, we'll turn to Jeffrey. Jeffrey's one of our key contributors in education. Can you introduce yourself and tell us what you're most excited about? And I've got a question for you as well.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. So I'm Jeffrey Pellegrino. I've been a volunteer with the American Red Cross for a couple of decades now, and have been really blessed to be able to be part of the international community. And thinking about education over the last 3 guidelines that have come out from GFARC and the IFRC, and to see how education has grown from just sort of being mentioned to having its own chapter, to now to be integrated with all the great clinical work that has been done from their evidence perspective, and the load of leadership from Christine and from Emily. It's been really a neat thing to see 45 different countries and 127 different contributors come together based on our principles within the Red Cross, and allowing each of us to make our own decisions on how to interpret this information to make our experiences for our learners the best for them. at the time that they need it. So that's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. Okay, can you tell us, as a contributor, and you've been a contributor for quite some time, what are the challenges? Now, Andrew and Dr. Shindra have both talked about some of the positives and some of the ways that you can contribute, but what are the challenges in being a contributor?
I think part of being a contributor is figuring out what is actually needed. And many people within the process came at this from not having any experience at all at reading research and being able to make sense out of it in a systematic way. And what I think was really awesome was that they developed a process for us to be able to navigate and work through the literature that and sometimes was given, but sometimes that we found. And we were able to use a template and a process to build something for the guidelines. And then the excellent work by the editors has turned it into something even more special. And so I think getting through that is a challenge, but it's also a professional opportunity for people like myself to learn something that I might not have realized that's happening in other places. And so with that challenge comes a lot of great opportunity. And again, for some of the topics, it was maybe, a very short amount of time, but I learned something from each of those experiences, and I've been able to put it into my own practice as an instructor and in my own practices in creating guidelines with the American Red Cross.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Suzanne, what are some of the challenges you found with being a contributor?
Oh, I think it's not only challenges, but what Jeff already mentioned, we are also a big learning aspect we all had, although some of us are doing this now quite for a long time, but we always learn a lot new. On one hand, we learn about on needs, what national societies have. We learn about on which topics scientific evidence was developed or could be found now in this process. And on the other hand, still where we have the white spots on this map where we still have to rely on best practice because there is still no scientific evidence done. And we also hope that this program might bring young or elder researchers to these topics and look for some evidence for topics. And maybe for the next round, we will have more evidence-based aspects and less only good practice points, because we will find more evidence on some topics where we still lack the evidence.
Great. Emily?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on Susanna's point there, which is that it's not all about the academic papers either. A lot of the good practice points that we've brought in to the guidelines, both in the clinical and the educational sections, are from experts in the field. And we've been really lucky this time round to have fantastic experts from the ICRC, from water safety and drowning organizations, from the Global Disaster Preparedness Center, talking about disaster, all contributing. And perhaps this is a moment to bring Thomas in, because actually that contribution of people who actually do this on the ground in really tough circumstances, I think has added a huge amount of richness to what we've done, to what we've been able to do.
Excellent. So why don't we do so? Thomas, why don't you tell us who you are and what you're most excited about for the guidelines, and then we'll get you to talk a little bit about the crisis environment and some of the adaptations.
Thank you, Christopher. My name is Thomas Wilp, so I'm the head of the pre-hospital emergency care and first aid program at the ICRC headquarters, and I supported the guidelines together with an amazing team at the ICRC with the delegates and some field officers, and our input was in the main area of the ICRC, so in the area of conflict. And I have to say that I'm really, really proud what you and the team have put together here. The scientific evidence behind first aid, I think most of us, even an organization like the ICRC, would not be able to bring that together. And we give that to all the trainers, educators, and first aid developers around the world now. And they should read these guidelines not as a course book, not as a course manual. It's a guideline. It is guiding you. So you take the best evidence that we can offer you and you adapt it to your context. You adapt it to your audience. You adapt it to your resources, and you adapt it to the context. And the context in the ICRC world is very often a very hostile, conflict, violence context, and safety and security plays a big, big role for us. And that's why we need to adapt the guideline, which is there, to our context, to our audiences, and to our resources. And the resources in wars, in armed conflicts, are often very, very limited. And if you are under fire, you can't do what somebody maybe in Paris or Calgary or New York could do. But we all get something out of the guidelines, and it's now up to the teams around the world to really take what we provide them here, or what you provide them here, and to adapt it and to make the best for them out of these guidelines. Use them as guide, and don't see and don't read them as a law book or as a Bible. It's just guiding you and giving you what is out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. We're seeing a couple of questions pop up. We are going to talk a little bit about the International First Aid Attestation. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, and then of course we're going to share more about the platform. As we talk to the contributors, we hear, even though I push them to talk about challenges, all of the positivity, and that's something that happens no matter when we get together, all the outpouring, and we're seeing that in the chat as well. Again, we've got contributors from Iraq, Lissos, Iranian Red Cross, Red Crescent, Belgium, Panama, Spain, some as far as a stone's throw away from me here in Canada, Ecuador, Trinidad and Tobago, welcome, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Malta, and I'm sorry if I'm missing countries as we're having our conversation. Next, Pascal, we've heard a lot about what's exciting about being a contributor, how people contribute. Can you tell us a little bit about how you become a contributor?
It's very clear that many people contribute to these guidelines, and these guidelines, because you want some of you want to download these guidelines. Don't worry, you will be able to download it in our website. And the contributors, as we are, but we many people, many friends work with us before this day, and that's very important to say that, as Thomas said just a few minutes, it's a link between science and practice. It's very clear that we want to put on the paper the evidences, but you have to adapt them, and effectively you have to contextualize your material, because it's not a first aid book. It will be just an example. It will be just a context, and after you have to take into account who are around you, who need you. And it's very clear that with the content of this guideline, you will be able to propose, as in Saudi Arabia, for example, the best tool you need. And that's very important, because we can't use, and that's also the force, the strength of our panel. We are coming from all around the world. We have not the same environment, and we try to work together, taking into account our differences. And that's very important. That's the reality of our experts coming from around the world, because we are, of course, man and woman, but we are also black and white. We are coming from some different parts of the social world, and that's very important to take that into account. So with these guidelines, we try to help you. We try to of course to bring you probably first the science, and for that we work with fantastic partners as the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, European Resuscitation Council, or other resuscitation all around the world. And that's very clear that we need to work with this partner, because they are the science. But after, and when I saw the chat, it's fantastic. We're here today, so many people coming from all around the world with instructors, and the instructor is the most important people of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, because if the instructors don't take into account the science and take in practice what we search in the science, it will be absolutely no sense And it's very clear that the application, the setting up of the practice is our instructor coming from all around the world, as today in this chat, and it's absolutely fantastic to have everybody all around the table.
Okay, thank you so much, Pascal. In the next couple of minutes, we're going to transition to getting some questions from you in the chat, and you're welcome to enter those questions now, and we'll keep an eye out for them. As we've heard some key themes or some key messages from our panel of experts here. Really, that process of translating our evidence into our action. How do we translate that best scientific evidence that's available into action through education? We've heard about inclusion and diversity. You've also heard about opportunities to contribute and how some of our contributors have done so. Chris, I'm going to ask you a quick question. As one of our editors, can you tell us what style of language is used throughout the guidelines, and do I need to be a doctor to understand?
Yeah, no, you absolutely don't need to be a doctor to understand the guidelines. No, we've been really aware as we've written the guidelines that we're writing for a really diverse audience, so from all around the world, from clinical backgrounds, but also from education backgrounds and lots of other places. So we've tried to reduce the amount of clinical language or technical sort of language that's in the guidelines, and just simplify them as much as possible. And really, we've tried to make them much more human than perhaps what they were in the past.
Excellent. Emily and Jeffrey, I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about the chain of survival behaviors and how they've been applied to each of the topics in the guidelines. Can you tell us a little bit about how this is applied to first aid programs? And we'll start off with Emily.
Thank you. Yes, the chain of survival behaviors was born, I think, in the 2016 guidelines, and it's actually become a real mantra for us in the Red Cross movement. So we're very grateful to particularly Jeffrey, who led on that process back in 2016, creating that. But how everyone sort of jumped on board with it, and it does help provide a very helpful framework for us. I think I'd just like to start by saying that we know, all of you know, that first aid isn't a green box on a wall or in a cupboard or a kit that lives in your car or in underneath your kitchen sink. First aid is about that much broader scope of prevention and preparedness, right through to being able to recognize and give help and find help when you need it and help people to recover. So I guess from my perspective, the chain of survival behaviors really gave us a framework to create the educational content for the guidelines throughout all of those first aid topics, and also allowed us to be able to draw into those different communities that Thomas talked about, that Andrew's talked about, and so on, people in different situations, and how they can apply to different to the different parts of what first aid really means for us. But perhaps Jeffrey can talk a little bit specifically about the education and how you might be able to frame your learning by using the chain of survival behaviors.
Thank you, Emily. So yeah, the chain of survival behaviors really was born from an educator's perspective. If we know that direct pressure is going to stop bleeding in most cases, then we have to put it into some level of context to see when and how people are going to learn how to do that. When do they know how, when do they want to apply direct pressure? Do they have the right resources to direct pressure, to do it safely? And then what's really, I think, important about the chain is that it follows beyond that initial care. And that there are really important things to protect people from things like infection and how to help promote healing, which are all goals of first aid. And so that chain of survival behaviors puts in our heads as educators and as practitioners, how do we help people move through that chain so they ultimately are resilient and can heal and grow from their emergency back into where they can be productive citizens again. And so when you look at the guidelines this year, you're going to see that chain of survival behaviors in detail. Some of them need more evidence to what are some of the best ways to teach in each of the links of that chain. And I would invite everybody who's on this broadcast to think of themselves as a potential contributor to the 2025 guidelines by looking at what they're doing in their programs and how do they teach people how to prepare first aid kits? How do they teach people how to clean water so that they can have clean wounds after you've stopped the bleeding, and processes like that. And then to share that through the International Journal of First Aid Education, or share that through Red Cross channels, or maybe some other media, so that we can all learn and figure out those best practices and build some level of evidence for each chain of that chain of survival behaviors.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And another place to share, of course, is through our platform. So through the Global First Aid Reference Center's platform, you'll have the opportunity to share resources that you develop based on the guidelines. We're going to turn to questions from the chat now, from hearing from you. But before we do so, I'd like to mention what I'm most excited about for the guidelines. I am most excited about the expansion into diversity and inclusion. I'm most excited about the path that we've set for the future in terms of starting to talk about expanding context and looking at more opportunities to provide care and to provide education in first aid. Salome, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you all for your active participation in the chat. So we already have some questions for you contributors, but do not hesitate to continue ask questions through the chat. I mean, it is your time now for the guideline, and then we pass to other projects. So maybe Christine, you can answer that one. Could you tell us in how many languages the guideline will be available? Could you please precise us more about this?
Yeah, sure. So today we're launching the guidelines in English, and then coming very soon in May, we will release the guidelines in French, in Arabic, and in Spanish. Then we're going to follow up after, a bit later in the year it will be, probably it'll be summer in the Northern Hemisphere, so maybe August or September, we will have Mandarin, and Russian coming. And if any national societies do want to translate the guidelines into their own language, then please do get in touch with the Global First Aid Reference Centre, because we can publish it on the website so that other national societies can also access the translation and that sort of thing.
Thank you so much, Christine. And yes, please, if you have any possibility of translating the guideline in one or another language, I mean, it will really help us to have it, and we can disseminate on the platform, as you just say. We have also maybe a question for Thomas. Thomas, some people were wondering where should they get the latest guideline for pre-hospital care in operation. Maybe you have some guideline that you can mention from ICRC?
So yes, we are developing some guidelines from ICRC, but there are also other organizations. So Federation is also quite active in pre-hospital care. I know that the Austrian Red Cross has a good expertise in pre-hospital care. The Norwegians, the WHO is currently working on minimal standards on pre-hospital guidelines. So there's a huge resource on guidelines that you can find out there, and don't be shy. Feel free to contact me if anybody needs some information. Contact me at the ICRC and I'm happy to support.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm seeing in the chat that you're actually quite famous in the ICRC world, because a lot of people seem to know you already. So do not hesitate to contact Thomas. And I would have another one, and I will give this one for Emily, because she's the specialist of confidence to act in first aid. Emily asked about if we have any data or any surveys around the confidence doing CPR for lay people, and if there is any comparison between the virtual class and the face-to-face class. Do you have maybe, can you tell us more about that?
Oh, that's very, very interesting question. And I know that a lot of national societies have been trying very hard to adapt their first aid education online. And for CPR, that is perhaps particularly difficult because it's such a technical skill, and it really requires some kind of feedback. What we have got in the guidelines is a section, one of the modality topics is actually on feedback devices. And that does show some evidence around feedback, whether that's feedback from a phone or from the resuscitation doll that you're using, or from an instructor. And I think that is where you might find some evidence that you're looking for. But I think that the most important thing there is that feedback or peer education or support from other people is really critical with that particular skill. Jeffrey might want to contribute to this answer as well, because I know he's studied this himself specifically. But I think, as I said before, the principles of education will always apply. It does still depend on your learners and whether they're okay with learning digitally or face to face. You know, which they prefer, which they've got the capacity to do more easily. But certainly with CPR, that kind of coaching aspect is particularly important, and the practice aspect, which is obviously a lot more difficult to achieve if you're just doing a pure online education experience. Jeffrey, do you have anything to add to that?
Just really quick, Emily. We do have a tool called the Intention to Aid, the I2A, which I'm happy to share offline if anybody wants to contact me. It's a survey, and it's all about attitude and intentions to help. And these are the kinds of research projects we'd love to share and get more information on from different contexts. The tool was used in the United States, but we would expect it to be different maybe in some other countries, and we'd like to learn more about it. And that's the community I think we're trying to generate with these guidelines.
And of course, that paper is referenced within the guidelines itself. So do look up that one. It's by Miller and Pellegrino.
Thank you so much for this answer. And you are a nice contributor who are happy to help you and happy to provide you data as guidelines. So if you do not know the email address or the website, you can just contact us and we will make the link. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Emily. Another one may be for Suzanne. Is there any harmony between AHA guidelines and the GFARC guidelines from your point of view? Was a question.
Sorry, which guidelines?
AHA, American Heart Association.
Certainly, I think the most important aspect is that here in the Red Cross guidelines, we really try to adapt or give room to implement to various environments. And as already mentioned, it might be completely different to do it in an armed conflict or in a disaster, or in a country which had a lot of resources, or in a country which has not that much availability of ambulances. And so this, I think, is the real strong point for this. Certainly, we included science from wherever we got it from the medical point of view, but I think this possibility and already the request for our users to adapt to their environment, I think, is what's really the strength of this piece of work is.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. And I've displayed one for Andrew, a technical one. Is a precordial foam advisable to apply by first aider?
That's a great question. This continues to come up, and here's the reality is that there is no randomized or observational control study on do I do a precordial thump or not. Can't find that. No one's done that. But we do have awesome evidence that CPR, find an AED, and activate the chain of survival there is. And so Can I make up a few scenarios where a precordial thump might work? Yeah, we could probably do that. But in putting that out to all of the learners, is it going to be very effective? We don't have any evidence behind that. So it's not included in the guidelines as an action. I've been an emergency and EMS physician for over 20 years, and I've had it work once. It's not really a common thing. So when we look through the guidelines about things that can be effective, we take these important concepts and try to prioritize what's more useful. And then it's a great question because you put it in the lens of what if you don't have an AED? Is it better than CPR? We haven't really checked that. So it's not included in there because we don't have science. We don't have papers behind it to support it. And maybe it's room for research. My suspicion is that there's limited role for it, just because the other big interventions, CPR, AED, activate your chain of survival, are key. Thanks for that. Awesome question.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We'll add that maybe for the next edition. And I have one last question before we move on to the other topic, before the IFA topic. So please, it's the time. If you have questions about the publication for the guidelines, please ask in the chat before our experts leave. And the last question I have there will be about the inclusivity of the guidelines. So maybe Emily, you can conclude on this one if you like. What about what is for in the guideline regarding the skin color, the disability of people, or how do you try in this guideline to be as much as inclusive as possible?
Thank you, Salome. Yes, I think we've all really been much more exposed over the last year or two to the importance of inclusivity in our language, in what we do, in how we behave towards other people. This has been, huge for all of us in terms of the pandemic, but also through the Black Lives Matter movement and the way that we are needing to be a lot more inclusive about how we refer to people in terms of gender, and disability and so on. And so for these guidelines, we've actually worked really hard, particularly Christine as editor, to make sure that all of our language within the guidelines is inclusive. And we really hope that you in your daily practice can take some of that with you and use it in your practice. But we found that we needed to look into skin color and disability and gender issues in terms of both the clinical first aid that we apply, as well as the educational practice. And so we've really tried with all of our topics to make sure that where there might be a difference between how you treat somebody because of their gender, for example, whether they're a man or a woman, or if they if an illness or an injury looks different on different colored skin, that recognition point is really brought in to the guidelines, that it's all there. And also when we're educating people, if our learners perhaps have disabilities, then we're encouraging the educator to find ways to work with those learners to make sure that they can learn as well as anyone else can learn. And I just think that's a really progressive aspect of our guidelines this time, that we've really been able to bring those parts in. And that's another thing I think we should all be really proud of, because it's been quite a big move for us, and it's a really important one.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thomas, would you like to add something on this?
Yes, maybe adding on that, and from my experience, the first aid has nothing to do with who is doing it. I've seen amazing kids doing first aid, and I had people from all steps and all sorts of life. And the most amazing first aiders I had, they couldn't even write or read. It's not about education. You have to adapt your education to your audience. It's different if you teach school children, if you teach disabled people, if you teach nurses and doctors. That makes a difference. But how good you are in first aid and how well you do first aid has nothing to do with skin color, education, background, or whatever. If we really keep to what Emily has said, to train the people what is beneficial for them and what they are really, really interested, then we get all of them, and all of them are interested in some topics of first aid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for this adding. Some people are trying to reach also some contributors, so I've just displayed the email address of GFARC, and then we can make the link with Jeffrey, with Emily, Christine, Suzanne, Thomas, and many more if you like. I have also a question from our colleague from Geneva, Banu. Nice to have you there, Banu. Can you, Christine, maybe tell us more about the different topic we have on psychological first aid, which is one of which is part actually of our guidelines, and we have made this in collaboration with the PSS Center. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, sure. Yep. So we've increased slightly this year the psychological first aid topics. So we have in the general approach, we have some guidelines around the psychological first aid as a process, and then we have topics then within a mental distress section. So we've got in there, we have a traumatic event, so guidelines for helping someone in a traumatic event, suicidal ideation, and also acute grief. So there's those 3 mental distress topics, and they've got really great information in there that will, I think, really help with developing programs that can help people who are in mental distress. So I'd encourage everyone to go and check those out.
Thank you so much, Christine. Was someone talking? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few words about psychological first aid, because effectively, in fact, it's not a theme outside of first aid. Psychological first aid is really for every action we are doing, and since the protection to the technical gesture, we have to take into account this psychological support. We are not stopping an hemorrhage. We give support to a person who is bleeding. That's very different. It's not a technical aspect. It's really, we take into account the person in the entirely, and not just the fracture or just the hemorrhage. That's the principle of the psychological support included in first aid since the beginning to the end of the training.
Thank you, Pascal. And for the colleagues who are looking for some materials or some videos, I really recommend you to have a look on the PSS Center website, the Psychosocial Support Reference Center. It's an IFAA reference center, a global one, like us, and we were really glad to make some topic with them. So do not hesitate to go on their website. It's really complete. They have webinars, they have materials. So thank you very much for this. I take this opportunity because we had a question on that to tell you that we have also video that you can use on your trainings if you like. It's on the YouTube channel of the Global First Aid Reference Center with the same name actually. And you can actually use for free any video in French, Spanish, and Arabic and English for sure. I think it seems to be okay for our audience today with the questions. So I will let the word to Christopher for conclude on this session on the guideline before we pass to the IFAA project. Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah, thank you so much to each of our panelists, Emily, Andrew, Jeffrey, Chris, Suzanne, Pascal, and Thomas for being here and sharing your insights with us. As Salome mentioned, you're welcome to reach out to the Global First Aid Reference Center if you'd like to connect with any of these, and we can help to make that connection. We're really excited about the guidelines. We're really pleased and proud, and today is a big day for celebration for us, getting to see them pushed out into the world. We're going to talk a little bit about the International First Aid Attestation very shortly, and then about the platform that hosts all of our Global First Aid Reference Center materials. Some of you have asked where you can find resources, but we should also ask where we can share resources. There will be callouts in the next little while asking for you as a national society to share your resources of what you've done with the guidelines so that we can build a repository and really create a safer world. So thank you everyone for joining us. We'll move to the International First Aid Attestation at this point. And we're going to be introducing some new people, so we'll let Salome swap around, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you very much. We are less people for the International First Aid projects.
Great. So here we get to welcome Diane. Diane, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as you join with the International First Aid Attestation discussion?
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be with you today. I saw there are many colleagues and people I know for a long time who are friends now. So it's really a pleasure to be with you. I am manager of the Global Reference Center, and I am in charge of America, Europe, and Africa.
Excellent. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Can you tell us, Diane, a little bit about what the International First Aid Attestation is and why a national society might be interested in it?
Yes, of course, the interest of the IFA, so we call it IFA, is to get a recognition of the first aid training programs. It's not a recognition of a national society, but a recognition of the first aid training program. And of course, quality is at the center of this project. The basis to get the IFA is the guidelines we talked about just some minutes ago. And of course, as the guidelines have both the clinical and the educational aspect, this means that following the guideline is a whole aspect of quality for getting the IFA. National societies also sell very often their courses to some companies, international companies sometimes, and it's a great thing to get the IFA because it shows quality insurance to the clients. So I really hope that after the IFAC in Europe, there was the European First Aid Certificate. Now we have the IFA, which is a global project. So all national society from our network can apply and get this IFA, which is a good recognition.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Salome, can you tell us a little bit about what your role is? Now, we should all know that Salome holds many hats with the Global First Aid Reference Center. So can you tell us about your role with IFA? And then is the process long to go through, and how long does it generally take?
Sure, thank you, Christopher. So I'm Salome. I'm a first aid officer for 3.5 years now. I used to be a volunteer also, and my role as GFARC is I'm in charge of all the communication projects. That's why I was here from the beginning, and also I'm in charge of the Asia Pacific region and MENA region. So any national society in both regions interested in IFA can actually reach me, and the other region can reach Diane. So regarding the International First Aid Attestation project length, I would say it really depends. I mean, now we are in a time of pandemic, and you all know that travel might be strongly reduced and cannot happen sometimes. And IFA is relying on what we call the field visits. So it means that we have an IFA representative in charge of all the process for a national society, and this person is supposed to come to another national society. So this second step takes quite a long time, and it really depends on how much time the national society has to organize that, and also how big is the country, and the availability of the IFA representative. But from the field test we had, we actually can evaluate the time between 3 months and 6 months, depending on the country and many factors that can happen. As a reminder, you have the first step, the self-assessment, and it's a big document where national society have to go through regarding the numbers of people trained in their national society. They have to send us their manuals. They have sometimes to translate it into English so that we can understand. So this takes at least 1 month. And then there is the field visits. And then we give also the feedback to the national society and work, if necessary, on an action plan.
Excellent. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the International First Aid Attestation, and we've just talked a little bit about the International First Aid Resuscitation and Education Guidelines for 2020. So let's talk a little bit more about the benefits for my national society. So can you tell us a little bit about what those benefits are for instructors and for the public that might be receiving that care? And Salome, we'll start with you.
Yes, sure. So as Diane mentioned a little bit in the beginning, but the IFA stamp can truly be for a national society a really advantage in terms of competition with other first aid provider in the country, because it relies on evidence-based guidelines. We were just talking about the strength of those guidelines in the last 30 minutes of this live. And it's also not something which is standardized. So we are really taking into account all the context. We are talking there about harmonization and not standardization. And I think for a national society, it's a strength to have that, because it really recognized the work of the national society, but in his country. We don't want to have the same training all around the world. We really want to have something according to the needs of the audience, to the need of the people there and the community. And this is a strong advantage. For the trainers, I would say that it's good for them, because they are in this process that we promote here at GFARC of a continuous improvement of their training, and as trainer, they can actually improve their practice. They can be aware about the last changes in the science for sure, but also in education, because as we talked about, there is a strong focus on education in the guidelines. And as the guidelines is the reference of this IFA, then the trainers will benefit from it also, thanks to all the education work that has been done. So I would say that we really summarize that in the quality first aid training.
Great. And Diane, can you tell us, is the stamp valid forever? And how much does it cost for my national society to go through this process?
Yeah, so the stamp is not forever, of course, because the trainings shall move and change. So the stamp is valid for 5 years. As this year the IFA is launched, that means that for the National Society, which will get it this year, they have until 2025 to reapply. So after 5 years, you can reapply, but each application means that there is an IFA representative linked to your application, and this IFA representative will make with you a follow-up plan, either an improvement plan or a follow-up plan. That means that national societies have always means to be better and get more and more quality in their training programs. So keep in mind that it's valid for 5 years, and in terms of cost, there is a fee. The fee is 500 euros. And then, as I said, you have an IFA representative that will come to your country and have a discussion with you as first aid coordinator, and also have a look to some of your first aid training for which you have applied. And this means that there are some costs linked to the accommodation, to the flights, and food, but no more. It depends, of course, where the IFA representative come from, but we will be careful about the distance, both in terms of cost and of ecology, of course.
Great, thank you. Pascal, can you tell us about who these International First Aid Attestation representatives are that do the field visits?
Of course, of course. First of all, it's very clear that, as Salome and Diane said, the International First Aid Attestation is not a one-shot. It's not just the possibility to have a new stamp in my diploma. It's really a spirit. It's really to increase the quality of my training in my national societies, and for that I can be helped by effectively, as we said, IFA representative. There are master educators who are coming from all around the world. Again, as today in this WebEx, we have so many instructors coming from all around the world. It's the same for for our group of IFA representative. And this IFA representative will have, in fact, the role first to help the national society, because that's the most important, help the national societies to first have a self-assessment and speak about what we are doing in our national society, to have the feedback of this representative, and after to try to increase the quality of my education. And last and not least, of course, when we will be able to travel, or perhaps by distance also could be possible, this IFA representative will see my training, because I will be on the spot, on the field, and I will do my training, and the IFA representative will see if the training are in accordance with my self-evaluation. And last and not least, of course, they will give me a feedback. What I have, is it good? Do I miss some subject included in the guidelines? Because that's very important. What we underline is the link between an International First Aid Attestation and the 2020 guidelines. So that's the most important. Our IFA representative in fact are the ambassador of the guidelines 2020, and the helper of the national society to obtain the International First Aid Attestation.
Thank you very much. We're very lucky to be joined right now by almost 50 countries from around the world. It's just thrilling for all of us to see you here. And as I'm seeing some of the comments go by, I noticed that some of our IFA representatives and the contributors to the guidelines are here. We've got Gabor from the Hungarian Red Cross. I see Shelley and Lyle from the Canadian Red Cross. So thank you all for being here with us. At this point, we're going to make a little transition to start talking about the Global First Aid Reference Center platform. So thank you very much, Diane and Pascal and Salome, for sharing about IFA. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do so, are there any questions from the audience? Please feel free to throw them into the chat, and we'll invite our panelists to share about them.
Thank you, Christopher. I think we answered most of the question. Just wanted to mention, because they are there with us on the chat, and Pascal was talking about them, our IFA representative, the people who will helping assessing the national society training. Those people, like Shelly from Canada or Dr. Samir from Saudi Arabia, who are there, they are actually from national societies also. So it means that from this process, one national society benefits from another one, and that's the spirit of this, and that's really into what we call harmonization. And then I think we haven't got other questions, but mainly comments. Like a lot of people seems to have interest in this, so we invite you to apply. And it has been a pleasure to present this with you, Diane. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So at this point, we're going to invite our colleague Adele Perkins from the British Red Cross to join us. Good morning, Adele. How are you? And good day, whatever time you're in.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. So as we've talked about the guidelines, we've already talked about the International First Aid Attestation, and many of you are asking where you can find more information about that. And Adele is here to share with us where you can find a lot of that information and even share more information. So Adele, can you start off by telling us a little bit about what the platform is and how it came to be?
Yeah, sure. So we went with the name platform more than just a website. So let me just go a little bit beyond that. It is the Global First Aid Reference Center website. So on there, you can find about all of their projects, who works in the team in Paris, as you can see on the screen now, how to get involved, how you can donate, a lot of information. So that's one part of it. The other part then is it's the home of the 2020 guidelines. So we've been madly putting on all the content from the guidelines, and each topic, each clinical topic and each education topic has got its own page. And you can look at all the details there. You can save the pages as a PDF and share them via Facebook or YouTube or whatever other social medium that you would like there. Thirdly, the next big bit is the resource media library. So it's just the start, but we've got nearly 200 resources there at the moment. And we have videos on how to do CPR, how to treat a burn, IFA material, the guidelines themselves. And what we'd like to do over the coming months is just collate as many first aid resources, as you mentioned earlier, Chris. We'd like to collate all of those resources and put it together there, so it sounds it's a hub for first aid.
Excellent. So as a national society, how do I go about sharing those resources with the Global First Aid Reference Center? And when I share those, what type of privacy settings, or how do I know how my materials are used?
Okay, all the resources at the moment are public, so anyone can see them. But what we're going to be launching in the coming months is a membership. So for the key national trainers in each of the national societies, we'll send them a log on. And once they're logged on, then they can then see the private resources. So these are the ones that you don't want to get out into the general public, and they're just for use for Red Cross national societies. We'll be setting that up, in the coming months, and those private resources are where we really see that the ability to share things. So you may have developed an amazing training plan, perfect for your country, but it could be used by neighbouring national society. So that's where we'd really like to see some sharing going on with those private first aid resources.
Excellent. Did you want to share some screens of the guidelines at this point? And before you, I'm just going to remind everyone that's watching, if you have questions about the platform or comments, please feel free to throw them in, and we will have some time at the end for Adele to address each of those. Adele, are you able to share?
I'm definitely trying to. Let me just see how this goes. Right, can you see the screen there now?
Yes.
We can. There's no sound on it.
Just hear the sound.
There's just a little bit of background music.
Adele, I don't know if there is any sound, but we cannot hear it, unfortunately.
That's okay. I can just talk around it. This is the first aid clinical topics, the landing page. So you can see all of the topics there, and I've clicked on severe bleeding. So this is an example of what the topics will look like. They're all in accordion size boxes. So as you're scrolling down, there's a little cross there that you can minimize the screen, so that if you only want to see the education considerations or perhaps the scientific foundation, it will take up less room on your page. On each of the topics, we've included all of the references as well, and they're clickable, so if you need to check anything, they're there. On the home page, you can see the countdown to World First Aid Day, news and events, first aid heroes as well. Here we head off to about the Global First Aid Reference Centre. There's lots of, this is just the menu structure here, all of the things that you can find on the site, lots of pages.
Adele, we've been giving out the web address periodically throughout our conversation. So this is the globalfirstaidcenter.org website, and people have been exploring it as we go as well.
I've seen lots of people on the site already. It's very exciting. So we're looking at the resource section of the site here. So if you typed in a word that you want to find, hit submit, it then brings back certain information linked to that word. So I typed in the word safe, and we've got the safe classroom list, which is a part of the 2020 guidelines. You just click on the name or the little description underneath it, and then there you can download it, download the document, and then often if there's a URL link, you can click on the link as well to view that. All of the resources are categorized into themes. So we've got basic first aid, advanced, COVID, communications from GFARC, that kind of thing. So here we're in the COVID-19 section, and there's lots of videos for coronavirus here. So if you click on that English link, it actually takes you to the Dropbox where all the other languages are. So if you ever see anything shared on Facebook or YouTube, oh, here we go, we've got a French screen. So all of the Global First Aid Reference Centre is translated into French, and we'll be looking to do that for Spanish and Arabic as the months go by.
Adele, can I share news of my National Society in this, like a first aid event?
Yes, so in the top right-hand corner of the site is the email, first.aid@ifrc.org. Anything that gets sent there, so news and events, once we get it, and as long as we've got enough notice, we can put it onto the website, and then we can help share and promote your activities. There we go, they've got the email at the bottom.
This is a spectacular piece of work. So again, globalfirstaidcenter.org will take you to the platform. Adele, what are you most excited about on the platform?
Oh, tough one. I'm just really excited that it's live now today. That's the most exciting thing. And I'm looking forward to it progressing. It feels like we're at the start of a journey. So it's great that we've launched the guidelines, we've launched the platform, but it's really, really going to get better when people are involved in it, when people are sharing the material, when people are giving us more resources, and also just that communication. So that's the exciting bit for me, the bit that's coming up. But mostly today, it's live. It's good. That's the best bit.
It's a big day. For those of you that may have been following along over the last couple of years, we've been using firstaideducation.net. If you were to go there now, it will direct you to the Global First Aid Reference Center's website that Adele's been working on. Adele, let's take a few more questions here. So how can I become more involved with the Global First Aid Reference Center or share materials and things like that using the platform?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there's the email in the top right hand, and then also on most of the pages, we've got these call to actions, and it will say how you can get involved or share your resources. So you just click on those links and it will take you to the page, which will hopefully detail what you need to do. But ways that you can be involved, you could be work on the guidelines for the next one. So, I know you've been speaking about that today. That's a great way to get involved. You can share your resources. If you're a national society or a lay person and you'd like to donate to the Global First Aid Reference Centre, that's always welcome. You could be, there's some internships that they advertise each year. There are translation volunteers as well, which would be a big thing if we could have anyone to help with the translation. I would love to get it the site in as many languages as possible. So anyone that wants to help with translation, that would be fabulous. Salome, have I mentioned all of the ways to be involved?
I think it's a lot still. So yeah, I mean, anything, when you think about first aid, you have to think about the platform. That's the idea.
Yes.
Is there a place we can discuss first aid on the platform?
Well, we do have a private group on Facebook, which is the Red Cross Red Crescent First Aid Community Group. So we've got nearly 4,000 members on there at the moment, and over the coming months we're going to be sharing the guideline pages, and that's going to start some conversation. And then once we've got the private membership for the training program managers set up, we're going to look at how people can communicate within the platform as well, and have share ideas and possibly even the evidence gaps, work on evidence gaps and how they can do research and feed into it. So again, that start of the journey, building on it, part of the process.
That's a big theme that we've heard a number of times today, that we are starting a process. So we're getting we're laying our path so that we can continue to develop in first aid with the Global First Aid Reference Center. And that's amazing. Salome, can we hear some of the questions that are coming in from the chat?
Yes, sure. So Adele, you've just answered the one about the community membership, and we will be able in the future to develop more about this together, to have actually more people log in and have private space. But for the moment, we have only public space. I encourage also people to share actually resources with us. And it's very important, as you said, because we need you for make this platform unique and really adapted to your needs and the ground also. Regarding the question, we had also one regarding, Adele, if we can actually find training in the platform for national society. What would you say about that?
I would suggest that they go to the resource section of the platform, and you could type in the word training, and then that will bring back a lot of resources. And then also, if you type in the word guidelines, you will also see a lot of the guidelines, and a lot of the appendix items from the 2020 guidelines are there. So there's the safe classroom checklist, there's facilitating CPR skills for an adult and for a child. What else is there, Chris or Salome? Anyway, there's lots of resources there that you can use in your training, and all of them you can just go to the resource section, download it, save it to your computer, or use the social share button on the resource if you're there live and you've got great Wi-Fi in your training classroom.
For the
And
guidelines,
Adele?
there's a couple of resources built right into the guidelines, some of those key pieces, but those are also accessible on the platform.
Yeah.
Sorry, Salome.
No problem. It's the challenge of the live, isn't it? I have a question, Adele, regarding people actually understood well that we have this guideline available electronically. So it's another way to navigate the publication that we propose there. Can you explain more about how people can save PDF, and if they can they actually have all those PDF in one shot, or do they have to just download the main publication?
Currently at the moment, you can have a PDF of the full 2020 guidelines with all of the references, that kind of thing. And then we can have a PDF per topic. So you could, depending on what country you're in, perhaps if you're in a hot country, you're not going to be so bothered about hypothermia, or whichever way that's going to work. So what you could do is go onto each of the topics and then PDF it and then save it. But we are looking to build on that further so that people could pick and choose and create their own bespoke guidelines. We need to investigate a bit further, because you'd want to put your own national society logo on and possibly change the language and that kind of thing. That's something exciting that we could look at into for this year.
Thank you so much, Adele. Actually, Chris, I haven't more question from the audience. I have a lot of compliment, Adele. I have a lot of people who really love the platform and find it accessible and amazing. So I hope that with you and other national society, we can actually spread it, disseminate it, and make it grow. So thank you very much, Adele, for all your work on this. And I pass the word to Christopher also to conclude.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Adele. Adele's been with this project for just over a year now. And Adele, what made the project possible?
The sheer hard work of everyone that you've seen speaking today. They've just worked hours, weekends, they've thought about it. And I think it's really the sheer will of the people behind it. And it's a really amazing team. And being very late to first aid, I've just been so inspired and about how passionate people are about first aid education and first aid, and making sure that that people know that anybody can save a life.
Excellent. Adele's work has been has obviously moved very quickly to arrive at the platform that we're at now, but she's also ridden the wave with us in terms of getting material up there as late as last night as things continue to develop and grow. So it's very exciting to see it live today and to see all the traffic on it. So thank you. You've done a wonderful job, and we're really pleased to have you here. At this point, we'll just thank you, Salome, for all that you've done in terms of helping us to moderate and keep the questions in order, and Diane for being here. And we'll turn it over to Pascal to close us out.
Oh, it's a great moment. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Christopher of the Canadian Red Cross in general, because Christopher, who moderates this webcast, but also the Canadian Red Cross, who supports so important the Global First Aid Reference Center. First, thank you also for all the panel who are the active pillars of the GFARC. But also, I want to thank you all of the participants, because I saw so many people in the chat, and of course I know some of them. It's a pleasure, but I hope I will know all the other in the future. It's not over, and you can be a force for change in this domain. The widest possible dissemination of the 2020 guideline depends on you, and with this presentation, we are able to, I hope, to help you to take into account these new 2020 guidelines. And of course, we want to present these guidelines during various meetings, during training of trainers, during WebEx, and of course, in some tools who are helping us a lot. For example, the International Journal on First Aid Education. The modern dissemination of this guideline is very clear because it's thanks to the platform. This platform set up by the GFARC, but first of all, we have to thank also the British Red Cross, because they support us a lot to have this fantastic new tool who will be able, of course, to share all the resources of the movement. And in this First Aid platform, we can help all the other. And that's very important, because we have not to reinvent the wheel of first aid if the wheel exists somewhere. And probably with this platform, we will be able to take into account the experience of the other, and that's very important. After, and one of the question was that we want to disseminate in all languages these guidelines, and as we said, as Christine said, it's very clear that very soon we will have a French version, and of course the two other official languages, the Spanish and the Arabic. But also we hope, and very clearly our Chinese colleague confirms us that we will have a Mandarin version very, very soon, and we hope to have a Russian one. So if we can have other languages, Portuguese or other local languages, all is possible, but it will depend of your support. That's very clear. And it's, of course, it will depend on the means we have at our disposal and at the disposal of the Federation. And last and not least, you understood that the integration of the guidelines in the International First Aid Attestation process is very important, which will contribute to the harmonization and not the standardization. As we said, we don't want to have the same first aid everywhere. We have to take into account the environment. We have to take into account the differences, and that's very important inside the Federation, but inside the movement more generally. So you can see it's just a beginning. I am sure that 2021, 2022 will be the years of first aid development. So I thank you so much, all the participants, and for sure have a good day, a good afternoon, a good night, but essentially a good year with first aid. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pascal. I'm going to close now. It has been so good to have you. I just displayed the email address where you can ask all your last question. I've seen some in IFA regarding the process, etc. So please note it down, and we continue the discussion offline there. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.